Welcome to the Screen the Screener College Basketball Podcast with your hosts, Mike Randall and Gus Kearns.
Welcome in, listeners, to the Screen the Screener College Basketball Podcast. We're always talking everything college hoops. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody out there. Hope everybody gets to spend some time with friends, family in the right place, in the right time, for the right amount of time. Hope everybody enjoys their meal. As we get ready for all the tournaments surround the holiday season and really kick off the college basketball season, we're trying to bring in some guests that are really going to get you peaked for some of these tournaments. And we brought in a great guest, Jackson Frank, from The Athletic and from The Step Back. You can follow Jackson at Jack Frank, all lowercase, _JJF. You can also follow Jackson Frank's work over at The Athletic, at TheAthleticCBB. And of course, you can follow Jackson's stuff at The Step Back, _step_back for his NBA draft insider information on Fanside NBA. Jackson was nice enough to talk about everything that zags, everything that's Gonzaga, and we caught up on everything that we need to know. We also expanded the conversation out. We talked a little Kentucky. We talked a little Nico Mannion. We talked a little Kaleb Wesson, and maybe he just might be the Jokic of the college basketball game. We talked about Drew Timme can fight through double teams. And if you don't have your eyes on Jackson's piece on Drew Timme over at The Athletic, that's well worth the look. So please take a peek at that. We also talked about who just might be the destroyer of worlds in the college basketball game. And we also talked about maybe an undervalued Xavier team, and then a couple of other matchups that we're looking forward to, whether it be Thursday, Friday, whatever your Thanksgiving lineup may include. Hope you enjoy the podcast. Hope you enjoy the conversation with Jackson. If you like what you're listening to, here on the Screen the Screener College Basketball Podcast, we're a marauder for ears. We try to get as many ears as possible. Please give the podcast a follow over at SDS Podcast, Efficiency of Keystrokes, of course. Please don't forget to give Mike a follow over at Randall Rant for all things fantasy football and all things college hoops. If you really like what you're listening to, don't be afraid. Be thankful. Spread some kindness this holiday season. Leave a kind review on your podcast consumption vehicle of choice. Say nice things about our guests like Jackson. Say nice things about our guests like Ellie Lieberman. Say nice things about our guests like Rob Doster or Matt Norlander or Barstool Reeks. Say nice things about those folks if you really like the content that you're getting here at the Screen the Screener College Basketball Podcast. Let's get to that conversation with Jackson, everything that is the Bulldogs. And happy Thanksgiving to everybody out there. Hope everybody enjoys. Cheers. All right, welcome in, Screen the Screener College Basketball Podcast listeners. And we have another special guest to help us get ready for the start of the season. We brought in Jackson Frank. Jackson Frank writes for Gonzaga for The Athletic. He also writes for the NBA Draft for the Step Back Fanside. Jackson, welcome aboard the Screen the Screener College Basketball Podcast. Thanks for giving that a little time to chat some college hoops between all of your assignments. The listeners are thankful. Happy Thanksgiving out there to everybody. We really, really appreciate Gonzaga here at the Screen the Screener College Basketball Podcast. Not many programs in the nation lost as much as the Zags did last year. I guess let's start with the losses, right? Maybe talk about, like what they lost with Perk and Rui and Clark and even Norvell getting a look from the Lakers.
Yeah, I mean, they lost 4 starters, I think upward of 70% of their scoring from last year. 2 best playmakers on the perimeter, Norvell and Perkins. All-American and Rui, obviously. WCC Defensive Player of the Year, Brandon Clark. So, yeah, lost a lot of basketball talent, but as elite programs do, they were able to restock through the transfer market and a really good recruiting class. And so we'll really get kind of a hint at exactly how good they are in these next few days in the battle for Atlantis in the Bahamas.
Yeah, I think the battle for Atlantis will definitely speak volumes on where this team is at currently. Let's talk a little bit about the elite program that Gonzaga has turned into or transformed into. They lost so much, like you just mentioned, yet they still exist inside of every preseason top 20. And now, everybody's rankings inside the top 25. Like, this is Duke and Kentucky and Kansas and borderline Villanova type stuff, where you can lose 4 NBA players, reload, and then still be existing inside preseason top 20s. So talk about the level that the whole program is existing at, even when losing that much talent that you just mentioned.
Yeah, I don't have an inside track in terms of what the recruiting pitch is, but I think from my vantage point is they really do seem to develop guys well. You look at, Rui made great strides in his years here. Even Perkins was a much better player from year 1 to 5. guys like that. Killian Tillie is a better player now. And so I think their thing is, like, look, you might not play more than 12 minutes a night as a freshman, even if you're a top 50, 60 recruit. But, like, I can guarantee you once time opens up, you will be ready to play big minutes. I mean, look at a guy like Filip Petrusev was really in and out of the rotation last year, was out of it by the end of the year, and now he's averaging 16, 17 points a game for the number 8 team in the nation. So I think kind of the combination of development and the fact that they are sending more guys off to the NBA every year, it seems, it shows that Gonzaga is a place where you're going to get better regardless of how long you stay there, and you're going to get a chance to play professionally, whether you're good enough to play in the NBA or go overseas or play in the G League somewhere. As good as you can be, you're going to get a chance to make money playing professional basketball on the next level.
Which is a bizarre element and a program track for a quote unquote mid-major. So I think that the reload that you're speaking of, it starts with a somewhat shaky foundation, and part of that shaky foundation just returned to health reasons with the big Killian Tillie. Let's start there. Will the freshman, you think he's going to be healthy enough to hold up for the whole entire season, because he's battled injury problems his whole entire career? And maybe more so, maybe speak to why he's so dangerous on the current basketball landscape with a big that can shoot threes and be a little diverse on the offensive end. Maybe talk about why he's such a dangerous player in the college game in the current basketball landscape.
He's just a really, really good player. He's an awesome shooter. I mean, he's like 48% or something from three for his career. Obviously, last year was kind of a shortened season, but has played 2 years of rotation basketball on a high-level team, and just shoots the lights out of the ball. Super smart player. Zone defense is pretty common in college, and Tillie's a guy who can break that up either as a shooter or a playmaker, kind of from that free throw line area, which is always open in most zones. Pretty mobile for a big, at least on the college level. Moves his feet well. So just does a lot of things that kind of connects the dots, and then he's really able to stretch the floor. Beautiful shooting mechanics, can kind of attack off the perimeter a little bit too if teams run him off the line. That soft touch, you kind of see it extending like kind of a little bit of a floater game too, so he can do that. So just a really versatile big man who can pick you apart as a shooter, make great passes too. And then defensively, he's just able to guard probably at least 2 positions and move his feet well and make the necessary rotations. So just a lot to like from a guy who's going into his 4th year that just has a really valuable skill set really at any level or league of basketball.
I agree. His toolbox is full of crafty stuff, but the really unique, the hammer that he has in his toolbox is that the range and the accuracy of which he's going to stretch the floor with. Jackson, let's educate people here. Let's educate the audience on 2 Bulldogs who shined international this summer. You mentioned Petrusev already, where he's already doing big things in the post and playing big minutes. And we had guard Joel Ayayi play really well for France during FIBA. Coach Few is going to trust these 2 sophomores with more minutes, more responsibility this season. How are they going to impact winning? And do you think they're going to fall into that opportunity that you spoke of earlier, where whoever's next up is going to get that opportunity to get better and get minutes and get exposure? So maybe talk a little bit about the players that the listeners don't know a ton about with Ayayi and Petrusev.
Yeah, Petrusev has a great post game, really soft touch, can finish with either hand inside. Pretty quick for his size too at 6'11", really good drop step, which has been working wonders so far. Granted, the level of competition isn't great, so we'll see kind of how it translates once they play some higher end teams. Just a really, really good post player, pretty smart passer. He's not quite at the level of Tillie as a playmaker, but kind of meets the threshold of teams are going to double him once he starts getting going in the post. He can find the open guys when necessary. And then he's a big, long guard. I wouldn't say big, but he's long, 6'5", 6'6". I haven't seen any reports on his wingspan, but I wouldn't be shocked if it were 6'8", 6'9". Pretty good passer, probably their best perimeter passer among kind of their group guards or even their wings. Improving as a 3-point shooter to 35% this year. Looks a little more confident in it. Defensively, I think he still has a little bit of ways to go for his impact to match his tools on that end, but really seems to have taken a step forward 2 years or freshman year redshirt, and last year he wasn't really in the rotation. And so, yeah, it does look like these guys have been kind of groomed to play big minutes and play rotation minutes, and a team that only has 8 rotation players, and I think only 12 guys in the active roster, they're going to have to play a lot of minutes. And so far they've done pretty well, but again, it's really tough to tell when they're playing kind of teams that aren't going to sniff the NCAA tournament are definitely off to a good start and looking like a couple more guys who have benefited from Gonzaga's development system.
No doubt. And I bet that, the international experience that they had over the summer is going to play dividends down the road somewhere. Maybe not that first big matchup that they have, but maybe it's somewhere down the road in a big spot on the road. They're going to be not fazed by that because hey, we had to play another whole other country in international play. All right, Jackson, Coach Few always leans on his lead guards, whether it be Perk, Nigel Williams-Goss, Pangos, Bell, etc. The cast is a little different this year. Admon Gilder, the Texas A&M transfer, and Ryan Woolridge, the grad transfer, are going to occupy those trusted spots for Few on the floor. So how does it look so far in the backcourt for the Zags with these untraditional guard elements that haven't been in the program year after year after year? What's the backcourt looking like for the Zags thus far?
You speak to that a lot of times. Few leans on his guards, and this year it really kind of seems like he's leaning a lot more on his bigs. Patricia has really been the center of the offense. Tillie is going to play a big role there. But Woolridge is their lead guard. He's going to have the ball in his hands a lot. He really likes to push the tempo. He's super quick. Likes to get out in the open court, get to the rim, make plays for others if he can. And then Gilder's kind of playing a lot more of a complementary role, especially offensively. He's not doing a ton with the ball in his hands, but he's quick to shoot when he's got open jumpers from deep. And he's obviously a pretty good shooter. We've seen that throughout his time at Texas A&M, and off to a good start from beyond the arc this year. So yeah, it'll be a different dynamic this year. You don't have that veteran guard. I mean, you have two experienced guards, but the benefit of Perkins was he'd been in the system for 5 years, and you could really trust him to make the right decision and get the ball in the right spot. And so yeah, I think it's a little different, but I think thus far they're off to a pretty solid start. Woolridge is tough. I think he has proven not to be a very good shooter throughout his college career. This year he's off to a good start, but at some point he's going to have to get teams to guard him out there. I mean, they nearly lost to UT Arlington last week because they just refused it. UT Arlington just refused to guard Woolridge, and it kind of gave him some issues. Woolridge shot well from deep, but it kind of messed up what Gonzaga was trying to do, feeding the inside there. So yeah, it's going to be different, and I think so far they're off to a good start. Woolridge is a pretty good passer. He can be a little bit erratic with his decision making at times, so they'll have to kind of balance his desire to really push the tempo and get inside, and then also run the offense through his talented bigs who can shoot and pass and all that. So I think thus far you have to be pretty encouraged considering how dry the well was last year after Perk left and Norvell graduated and then Greg Foster transferred. And so, I think you kind of have to just look at that perspective. They had very little experience returning last year, and now they have two fifth-year guys who look poised to at least handle some responsibility. But I do think they're really going to lean on that interior offense this year. And ideally, Woolridge and Gilder kind of play complementary roles more kind of setting the table than leading the charge. I'm
totally with you on that. I think if you're going to lean one way, if you're going to lean with, Petrusev and Tillie and the next guy we'll get to, Timme, if you're going to lean on your bigs to initiate some offense in the half court and maybe just have them, push pace like Few likes to do, I think that makes sense because both those guys are athletic. And like you mentioned, Woolridge does like to do that. So maybe which one of the newcomers will college hoop fans be familiar with on this current Gonzaga roster? I feel like Ryan Timme he's been awesome. Unbelievable piece on him. So please, tell the people where to find that beautiful piece that you wrote on him and maybe talk on maybe why he's so talented and what he's doing with the minutes and the extended minutes he's getting, game after game here. It seems like he's really been impactful during those short, limited minutes. So maybe just talk about Timme and maybe tell people where to find that piece that you wrote on him, which is really a great read.
Thank you. Yeah, you can find my profile of Drew Timme at The Athletic. It's under the Gonzaga Bulldogs college basketball tab. Probably have to dig a little bit. It's a few weeks old, but yeah, Timme's just been a really effective post scorer, really good footwork, can finish with either hand, pretty soft touch, not afraid to finish through double teams, which I think has been impressive thus far. I don't have the numbers or anything to see how successful it's been, but I have been impressed with his confidence and willingness to get pretty good looks up even when the paint's crowded. Then a pretty good passer. I know he's got near more than twice as many turnovers as assists this year, but I've been impressed with his passing. And then a really good team defender, especially for a freshman. Sometimes the game can move way quicker when you reach that level of college basketball. Making a lot of good rotations in the paint and altering shots at the rim, which I've been impressed with. Coach Few has really raved about kind of just his positive energy and work ethic thus far when kind of asked about it. So, I think it's just a combination of a guy who knows how to play the game and has a really wide array of skills and kind of been put in the perfect position in an offense that really encourages bigs to do a lot of different things to this point. Again, we'll kind of see exactly how his minutes shake out once the rotation is really solidified with Tillie back in the fold. It's really tough to figure out exactly the rotation at this point when they're playing poor teams and Tillie's just kind of getting back. But Timme definitely looks to have a solidified role as one of their kind of first bench bigs. And he's done a really awesome job this far, super productive in limited minutes. I mean, he's averaging nearly 12 points in 22 minutes. You extrapolate that to per 40. College Basketball Reference is averaging 21 points, 10 rebounds, a block and a half, a steal and a half each game. Again, granted, the level of competition isn't very good, but that level of raw production is very impressive for a guy who hasn't been in college for more than 3.5 months.
Totally in agreement there. Timme's been unbelievable thus far, and if you haven't put your eyes on Jackson's piece on Timme, definitely dial that up over at The Athletic. It's really cool, and it really helps explain his pathway to get to be a Bulldog and the success that he's found thus far on the floor. All right, Jackson, let's widen the scope a little bit. Let's go a little bit bigger picture here for the listeners. I think the first place we need to go with you is, are we worried about Kentucky? Just what happens, when a team is ranked number one? Is that what's going to happen time after time this year? Unbelievable job by Walter McCarty and the Aces. So I guess, are we worried about Kentucky? And I guess the second part of the question is just how gifted is the Kentucky perimeter with Hagans, Maxey, Quigley, and Huzang? It seems like there's enough talent to win big and maybe even win the whole thing, but I think we have to take a pause there after the last couple of performances. So I guess, if you're going to play doctor, what's the temperature on Kentucky over there?
Can't get worried about Kentucky. I feel like we do this every year with them. Yep. They bring in this huge recruiting class of freshmen, and they struggle a little bit early. I mean, last year they lost to Seton Hall, I think, in early December. Obviously, Seton Hall ended up being a pretty good team, but in early December, Kentucky was probably a team that wasn't one of the best 25 teams in the nation, even if the AP poll said otherwise. But then, I don't know, I can't remember if the game against Auburn went to overtime, but they were within minutes of making their Final Four. And so I don't think they quite maybe have the same level of talent as last year. I mean, P.J. Washington really came on strong kind of after the new year and led them. And, Tyler Hero found his way. But it's too early for me to get worried about them. I do think this is an interesting year because the last few years we've had kind of a dominant team emerge. Last year we had Virginia, the year before we had Villanova, and I just don't get the sense that we have with those teams. I know Duke's been really good. Kind of people thought Michigan State might get there, but Michigan State's already lost 2 games and nearly lost again today to Georgia. So long story short, no, I'm not worried about Kentucky. I do like the perimeter play, as you said. Huge believer in Tyrese Maxey. He's off to a pretty good start. He had a dazzling game against Michigan State a few weeks ago. Slowed a little bit since then, but still settling in really nicely. So I'm not overly worried. Calipari seems to do a really good job of getting his guys to peak at the right times, and I do think they have a pretty good mix of guys. Like I said, I like Maxey. Hagan's an interesting one, but obviously he's a pretty good defender, and if his jumper is truly improved, like people are saying, that gives them another weapon. I think Emmanuel quickly is really going to find his stride again this year, or find his stride this year in his sophomore year, up to 13 points this year after averaging 5 last year, shooting well from 3. I'm a fan of him, relatively speaking. I think he'll add some good stuff in the guard position. Nate Sestina has a little bit of defensive woes just with his mobility, but can really shoot the ball. I think that's going to add a really nice kind of dynamic to them. I don't think Kentucky historically has had a lot of bigs who can trust the floor like Sestina can. So we'll see what happens. I do understand kind of the pause for concern with based off losing to a team like Evansville, but at this point I trust their talent, and Calipari just seems to do a good job every year of getting his teams to peak at the right time. And I imagine in 3 months from now, we'll talk about Kentucky as one of the top 5 teams, and I wouldn't be surprised if they only have 4 losses or 3 losses now in 3 months or so.
Doesn't that sound about right? Doesn't that be okay, we're all concerned, the red flags are up, the radar is on, the antenna is up, and we're oh man, we're totally doubting Kentucky. But maybe we just need to go back to our original thought of okay, yeah, they have enough talent to get it right, and we're going to trust Cal as a coach to get it right at the right time, exactly like you said. And then we're going to look up and they're going to have 4 or 5 losses, and they're going to be a number 1 or number 2 seed. That totally makes sense. So maybe we just need to take a step back, review everything, and be okay, yeah, the Wildcats will be fine. All right, Jackson, I need your opinion on this because I was way off on Nico Mannion of Arizona. It's you're kind of keyed into a little bit of his skill set. So Jackson, talk what you've seen in your eyes and what makes the Frosh playmaker for Arizona really special, not only on the offensive end, but maybe even on the defensive end. And it seems like he has ability to, create and score at, almost all 3 levels for the Arizona Wildcats. It seems like he's maybe one of the freshmen that we should be talking a little bit more about.
Sure, I mean, I think he was pretty well regarded, but yeah, he's just been tremendous. I've been able to catch every Arizona game this year, and it's interesting. He doesn't always take over the game. I think in some of those games where they're winning by a lot, he's content to just kind of hit spot up threes and move the ball. But he was incredible in that game against Illinois. He was fantastic this week against the team. I can't remember who they played. I want to say South Dakota State. I think that was on Thursday. Long Beach State. They played on Sunday. He was incredible there. He was good against South Dakota State as well last Thursday. But a really, really smart player. Just kind of always makes not just necessarily the right pass, but is a very manipulative playmaker as well and pick and rolls. Really, really good shooter. Like his pull-up game is really advanced for an 18-year-old. The ability to stop on a dime and raise up and really quick kind of shot prep is impressive. I think a lot of times, guys struggle with that. Just kind of making sure they can get their shot off against longer, more talented athletes at this level or even in the NBA. Mannion's had very little difficulty with that. And then defensively, he has some limitations. He's not really explosive laterally, so he's been beat off the dribble a fair amount. But smart off-ball player, makes the right rotations, quick hands too. He's averaging a steal a game in 28 minutes a night, so pretty impressive there. He just doesn't quite have the explosiveness to get to the rim a ton, but it hasn't mattered at this point when he's shooting 48% from three, 81% from the free throw line, and has a great floater game too. We've seen that come out a few times this year. So at this level, especially, maybe not an elite NBA prospect, but in this level where the athletes aren't quite as good, he's been phenomenal because he's an awesome shooter and is just a really, really smart player who understands how to play basketball. It sounds kind of cliche sometimes, but I think sometimes you get recruits who haven't fully grasped kind of the game and all its intricacies, and Mannion clearly isn't there. He's just a phenomenal player, and I think Arizona is going to be really good this year because of that.
Yeah, I agree with his athletic and game IQ. I think that's really an underrated part of his game. And you mentioned the one part that I'm kind of in love with is that floater mid-range game. He definitely has some good feel and some unbelievable touch on that part of his scoring ability. And that, I think, is what sets him apart. I mean, you mentioned the numbers. The numbers are what they are, and they're phenomenal for a freshman or for even for a senior. So if he's going to shoot it that well and have that floater game and, like you mentioned, like that pull-up mid-range game, he's going to be pretty tough to guard, even like you mentioned with maybe some limits athletically. Like he's not this uber athletic guy, but I've been super impressed with him, and I was way off. Jackson, one of the other guys that you've paid attention to is the Ohio State's Kaleb Wesson. You mentioned that he might play a similar role to Nikola Jokic, the Joker, which is the highest compliment for any big man anywhere, because we love Jokic. We think he's one of the most unique players, not even in the NBA now, but just in the NBA the past 20 years. What do your eyes see with Wesson that maybe has changed from years past, and maybe what can make this Buckeye team be pretty special? What unique talents does he hold? And do you think that the talents that the unbelievably dynamic DJ Carton, the freshman point guard that comes off the bench for the Buckeyes, do you think that those two talents mesh nicely? And do you think this is maybe a team we should pay more attention to?
Yeah, I mean, the Jokic comment was a little tongue-in-cheek. Obviously, Wesson's a very good player.
Right. I got you. I was with you.
It's tough to emulate that. But, yeah, right. Wesson's been phenomenal this year. The reports that I've read from people around the team, and even those who followed him last year and the years prior, he's definitely lost some weight, and it's really helped his mobility. He's just a really, really good player on both ends, incredibly strong, even with losing some weight this year. Great post defender, awesome help defender, and then he's just really hard to stop in the post. And if you double him, he's very, very good passer for a big, and he can even shoot the ball a little bit. I mean, they've only played 6 games, but he's at 41% from three this year, 35% for his career, 73% from the line. So those are pretty good indicators for a big man. Yeah, he's just been phenomenal this year. I think I've caught 2 or 3 of Ohio State's games, and he's always just a joy to watch because he's a really good player. And I don't know how many points he scored against Cincinnati, but their opening game of the year a few weeks back was just a phenomenal game from him on both ends. It was incredible to watch. He didn't even have, I don't think he had even more than 12 points or so, but just the way he was able to impact the game was really impressive. And then DJ Carton, yeah, he's a guy who I didn't know a ton about previous exhibition games. Knew he was a top 70, 80 recruiter, whoever he was. I watched one of their exhibition games, and he just really popped off the screen. Super athletic, great handle, really, really quick and shifty. Some shooting questions, but at this level, I think he's going to be a really, really good player because he's a very good passer for his size and or for his position and his age, I should say. And then in the handle, it really allows him to create space off the dribble. He's kind of a little bit of an unwilling shooter at times because he has a little bit of a low release, but he's able to create space so much off the dribble that's not a huge concern. So I've been super impressed with what I've seen from him. I think, he and Wesson should work well together because Wesson can shoot the three. You can run some pick and pops and let Carton attack downhill, because even though he has done well from three this year at 35%, he is at his best attacking the rim with his athleticism and ability to finish at the rim. So Ohio State's a team that I've been really impressed with. I didn't know a ton about their pieces prior to the year, but I think they're 10th in the country right now, maybe a little bit outside of that, and I think they're very deserving of that. Just pummeled Villanova. That game was awesome for them. Yeah. Villanova was probably a little unlucky with some just missing some open shots, but I think Villanova is going to be very good as well. So that was a very impressive win in Ohio State's a team that I could see being a two, probably maybe a 2 seed, even maybe 1 seed when March rolls around, because they have the pieces, and Wesson's one of the best players in the country, and Carton complements him really well.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I agree with the pick and pop thing there. If you can get DJ Carton creating him a little space with his athletic ability, I think that makes sense. And if you're going to, have Wesson step back and take an open jumper, you spoke to the numbers on how well he's shooting, over 40%. I mean, that seems like a tough situation to guard for opposing coaches. Totally with you on that. All right. And Jackson, we'd be remiss if we didn't ask you about your namesake, Jordan Ford, and maybe Malik Fitz, at St. Mary's. We feel like Ford is kind of special and Fitz is ready to explode this year. You got a little feel since, you're out there covering the WCC. Is St. Mary's ready to make that jump and, kind of jump off the page at people? Or do they just play a little bit too slow to be that explosive? So what's your feel on Jordan Ford, if you caught Fitz and maybe his expansion of his game, and just St. Mary's?
Yeah, I haven't caught any of St. Mary's games this year yet. But I would say I watched them decent bit last year, being one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the WCC. And right. Ford's just a really, really dynamic shooter, can create space off the dribble, quick release, knows how to get his shot off. Obviously, he's over 42% from his career from 3, and this year and last year he handles the ball a lot, so a lot of those shots are coming off the dribble, which is really impressive. So just one of the best guards on the West Coast. Obviously, they did kind of trip themselves up a little bit with the loss to Winthrop a few weeks back. But then Fitz is another guy. He was pretty impressive last year. Obviously, it looks like he's a bit primed to assume a little bigger role. I think he just complements Ford well. I'm not necessarily positive. I think some people thought St. Mary's might challenge Gonzaga. Perhaps this is kind of my bias coming in, but I don't think they're quite as good. But I do think they're a top 25 team when things are all said and done. I think they really started to find their stride last year. They were able to knock off Gonzaga in the WCC championship game and then nearly knocked off Villanova. So I think they really figured some stuff out last year, and maybe hasn't been off to a great start this year considering their expectations and their resume. But I do think they're a team that should be really good come March, whether that's a 3 seed, a 4 seed, a 5 seed. I'm not exactly sure, but I expect them to comfortably make the tournament, be a team who could potentially play in that second weekend. I don't know if for the first time in program history, but one of the few times in program history for sure.
Right. I remember when they had I think they made it when they had Samhan, the big guy inside, that Sweet 16 run. And look, if you're going to have a dynamic guard like Ford, who's going to be a shot maker, and the way that they play, the pace they play, if you're going to have that valued shot maker with those possessions being at such a low level, then that's an advantage St. Mary. So that makes sense. And I agree. They're one of those teams you have to talk about if they're going to be a Sweet 16-ish type team and should make the tournament comfortably. And we'll see. We always look forward to that St. Mary's Gonzaga matchup, so we're looking forward to that when that happens. All right, Jackson, after watching so much NBA, because we cover Sixers and watching just as much college hoops, just talk overall game here. Enlighten the listeners. What's one trend that the college game is maybe lagging a little bit behind on, but maybe a couple of smart college programs have taken advantage of this season? And if they're sharp, maybe they're going to hold on to those trends. So what's one thing that a couple of sharp, really smart college hoop programs have stolen from the NBA, since you get to watch both games and you cover, the Sixers on the NBA level and Gonzaga on the college level. What's one thing that you think might be lagging a little bit behind and maybe a couple of smart teams have caught up with and maybe copycatted?
That's an interesting question. It's tough. The one thing I think a lot of smart NBA teams or NBA offenses do is really leverage their elite shooters and how much defense will pay attention to them. That's a lot tougher in college because teams are so willing to go to that zone because there's no defensive 3-second. But I do think there is some room, especially against man-to-man defenses. If you have an elite shooter at the college level, to use that a little more. I thought Purdue did it pretty well last year with Carson Edwards.
Yeah.
Obviously, he didn't shoot like 40% or anything last year from three. He did the year prior, but used him a decent bit as a screener. I thought they used him off ball a fair amount as well, even though he was clearly their best creator. And that's the biggest thing I think that really smart college teams do, and then NBA teams. And then kind of similarly, on the flip side, is when teams have guys who command a lot of attention at the rim, kind of the catchphrase or the buzz phrase is like kind of rim gravity or interior gravity or roll gravity, I think is kind of the one people gravitate toward. Gravity and gravitate, the same sentence. I think that's another thing that, a lot of teams should benefit from. I mean, the big thing that impressed me with Wesson against Cincinnati a few weeks back was how many open shots he generated for teammates just because Cincinnati was so cognizant of his presence inside. But I think just overarching is NBA teams do a pretty good job, or the good ones do a good job of maximizing like kind of the gravity their best players hold. And I think we're still kind of trying to find that in a college game, but it's also very tough when teams are so quick to resort to zone defenses because shooters aren't as good and the floor is a little more cramped because the 3-point line is closer. Yeah, but those are a couple of things that I do think the NBA is a little bit ahead on.
Yeah, you even mentioned this when we talk about Woolridge, like where they're going to slough off of him, and then that ruins a couple of the things that Gonzaga is going to try to do on the offensive end. So that creates that problem that you're speaking of right there. All right, let's get some quick takeaways from you. Just give me what's one thing you noticed from each one of these things. What Jackson, UVA, Arizona State, a single possession game goes down to the wire. Will anyone ever score on UVA besides Anthony Lamb? Huff and packs again on both ends of the floor. What was your takeaway from UVA, Arizona State? Anything to share with the listeners there?
I haven't been able to catch that game yet. I have a really long watch list of games. I'm just trying to make my way through them. But I was able to catch the UVA Vermont game when Lamb did go insane. And yeah, their defense looks as awesome as ever. Obviously, Diakite is kind of a destroyer of worlds with his mobility and ability to on the perimeter, and then also his ability to protect the rim. Kihei Clark looks to be a pretty good point of attack defender from what I saw in that game I saw last year. So yeah, I think they're going to be an elite defense again. Whether they have the offensive firepower they had last year with Ty Jerome, Kyle Guy, and DeAndre Hunter is yet to be seen, but I really do like what I've seen from DKT this far. And I think last time I checked, they were leading defensive efficiency in KenPom, and so I don't know if they're still there after a couple more games, but obviously they slow the game down so much to maximize their offensive possessions and really get into defensively that I would not be surprised to see them still leading. Yeah, they're first in defense still by, oh my goodness, a wide margin on KenPom.
Yeah, it is a wide margin. You're right.
It's over 3 points. So, yeah, I mean, they're doing the same thing as ever, and I think DKT getting bigger minutes this year is probably a boost to their defense, even if they lost a good defender in Hunter last year. So the offense obviously isn't quite where it was last year by any means, but yeah, I was very impressed with their game against Vermont. To survive an onslaught like that from Anthony Lamb was very impressive. I mean, what Lamb did was incredible, the shots he was hitting. But yeah, it'll be interesting to kind of see how the ACC shakes out with 4 top 10 teams all vying for that top spot. But yeah, Virginia looks not anywhere close as dominant as last year, but that's to be expected when you lose 3 guys in the NBA. But they were so much better than every team last year. It seemed that they have a lot of room for error, and they seem to be one of the top 6 or 7 teams again.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think if they're going to, revisit that elite status that you mentioned that they had last year, I think they have to shoot the ball better from 3. They're middling, in the mid 20s as far as 3-point percentage. So if they're going to, revisit that greatness that they had last year when they won the whole thing, definitely have to uptick there from the 3-point land. Okay, how about Baylor, Villanova? We talked a little about Nova and the Buckeyes. Doesn't it seem to you like Jared Butler could slip on a Nova uniform and fit right into the offensive profile that Jay Wright likes to run? It seems like he's been one of the best players in the nation that nobody's talking about. Baylor has some shooters. I was just really impressed with Baylor, and I was just really impressed with the confidence and the swag that Butler played with. And it seemed like you could have switched him uniforms and it wouldn't have made a big deal at all.
Yeah, no, Baylor's been really impressive. Their guard play is awesome. With Butler, Bandu, Teague, I've been very impressed with what I've seen from them. Didn't catch the entire Villanova game. I caught a lot of that game on Sunday. I think that's when it happened. But yeah, Butler's just been a tremendous shooter this year. Obviously, he'll cool off to some degree, but I've even liked some of his passing. Obviously, it's not incredible passing, but definitely seems to have some level of vision, which I've been impressed with. But yeah, the kind of those guys who can shoot off the dribble and pass a little bit kind of fit that bill for Villanova's perimeter players. But yeah, Baylor's been awesome thus far this year. Slipped a little bit in that loss to Washington a few weeks back. But yeah, that was an impressive win over Villanova, a team that I'm still really high on. I know they've slipped down to 22 with a couple of losses this year. But yeah, Baylor beating them in a neutral site was very impressive. And like you said, yeah, Butler has kind of flown under the radar. I think that's plugged in people have seen it. But yeah, I don't think if you asked kind of the casual college basketball watcher, they'd know much, if anything, about Jared Butler, even recognize his name.
Yeah, good point. I think he's about to get to that point where people are going to start talking about him in the same breath that, we're talking about Jordan Ford and some these other great players like maybe Anthony Lamb of that nature. And then I guess just quick takeaway from the result of Florida Xavier, because Florida was, just stumbling and like kind of scrapping at things, and they were trying to figure some things out where Xavier kind of, snuck up on a couple of people. They have a bunch of good returners. Love Scruggs, love Nigel Marshall. So what was your takeaway from that? Did you feel like Florida just had to get it right against a great team like Xavier, and maybe, one bounce of the ball the other way and Xavier walks away with a win here? What was your takeaway from that nice matchup with the Gators and the Musketeers?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was good to see Florida bounce back. I was really high on Florida before the year started. I thought they're the best team in the SEC. It hasn't proven good, smart yet. We'll see what happens once they kind of find their stride. But it's good to see them bounce back and get a good win over a team in Xavier who I think is a very solid team. I think they were deserving of their top 25 ranking. I think they still are. The thing that's really surprised me about Florida this far is how much Trey Mann struggled. I know he's a little smaller and he's a guy who really relies on his shot making, but I really believed in the shot and still do. But I've been underwhelmed there. But yeah, I think it was just kind of a get right game for Florida. They have too much talent, too many good players. Kerry Blackshear's obviously one of the better big men in the league or in the nation. I liked what I've seen from Keontae Johnson this year. Noah Locking took the ball. Chad Lewis is still kind of figuring out exactly how to kind of merge all his athletic tools, but a heck of an athlete. And so, yeah, my big takeaway from that, it was just two pretty good teams. I think, if Scruggs makes that three, maybe they end up winning in overtime. Right. So, yeah, I've been pretty impressed with what I've seen from Xavier. I've watched a couple of their games. Scruggs looks pretty good. I really like his footwork and his ability to kind of finish with either hand in the lane. Marshall's a pretty good passer, some good length and size and perimeter skills for a wing. I also like Jason Carter. I don't think he's an NBA guy or anything, but he can shoot the ball, and they use that well. They use kind of his pick and pop ability well, and he can back off the perimeter a little bit. So, yeah, just generally speaking, it was good to see Florida get a win, and I think these are two teams that are continuing to play prominent roles in the national scene. But yeah, just takeaway is Scruggs is a legit NBA wing prospect, and that was the biggest takeaway from an individual perspective. But then for Florida, it was just too much talent to continue losing these games inexplicably.
I totally agree with you there. I think they needed to get it right, and you mentioned the phrase "get right game." We like using that all the time here on the podcast, and that's exactly what Florida needed at that point. And I'm totally with you on Scruggs. Like, Scruggs is legit. He's gonna play in the league. And we're big fans of Good, and we think that he's like one of those like classic, awesome college point guards that puts his time in. Maybe he's going to knock you out as a shooter or with his athletic ability, but he's going to make the right decision. He's going to play tough as nails on defense, and he's going to always find a way to make a big play in the game. So I feel like they have the right guy running the show there for the Musketeers as well. All right, Jordan, let's get some forward-looking slants. Just give me your quick 2 cents. If we're going to go to the Bad Boys Mower Showdown, right? I love the Bad Boys Mower. That's fantastic. What are your thoughts on, the Ducks, Oregon, and Seton Hall? We got two of the best guards in the nation with Pritchard and Miles Powell going head to head here. Quick takeaway, quick thought. What do you think of Oregon, Seton Hall?
Yeah, that one should be really fun. Obviously, that's a game I'll have my eye on because assuming Gonzaga is able to dispatch Seton Hall to play the winner of Southern Miss. They'll play the winner of Oregon Seton Hall. Yeah, I'm super excited for that game. Even a guy like Anthony Mathis is another pretty talented and solid college player that'll go up against Miles Powell. But I think Seton Hall is a pretty well-rounded team. Obviously, I wouldn't say pretty, but I guess some decent supporting players as well. But yeah, just excited to watch two veteran point guards go at it. Kind of differing styles. Obviously, Powell is kind of a shoot first, second, and third player, and that works for him because he's an awesome shooter. Whereas Pritchard's a little more steady and likes to he'll take the shots when they present themselves, but a little more of a pick and roll player who looks to kind of make the pass first. So kind of just experienced players with contrasting styles is always a fun a fun game to watch. And it's two top 15 teams. Oregon notched a big win against Memphis a couple weeks ago. Seton Hall obviously looks pretty good. Took Michigan State to the wire a couple weeks ago. So just should be an awesome game against two very good teams with point guards who have been effective for years now in contrasting ways.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the games that we are just thankful for. Again, happy Thanksgiving out there, everybody. Another game that we're thankful for, you mentioned Memphis. I think NC State has a real shot against Memphis on Thursday night, right? If we're talking Turkey basketball, where do you stand with NC State and Memphis?
Yeah, I mean, I think without Wiseman, it's going to be tough for Memphis to notch a lot of high-profile wins just because Wiseman, I think, factored in so heavily with just what they were going to do this year. I haven't been able to catch NC State yet this year, but really do like Markel Johnson as a player. His film just really popped from last year. I don't know how much of an NBA player he is, but I think he's a very good college player. Off to a rough start this year. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if NC State figures some things out and upset Memphis. I think NC State's a pretty solid team. Got off to a good start last year and kind of faded down the stretch, unfortunately, to miss the tournament. But yeah, I think I'd probably take Memphis in that game just because I think they have enough other talent and obviously a very good recruiting class this past year. But yeah, I think that NC State has a good chance for sure.
Yeah, I think Coach Keats is going to, obviously have his guys live and ready. I think, Braxton Beverly is one of the college stories going out there. He's going to play tough as nails. You mentioned Markel Johnson. He's one of our favorites as far as like a kind of do everything guard and wing player. All right, let's hit to Friday. Ready? We got a ton of stuff on Friday. You just tell me what game you're looking forward to. We got Purdue VCU, which is going to be amazing. Utah State and St. Mary's, who we mentioned earlier. And then we got Florida State and Tennessee. You got a favorite? You got a feel there? Jackson, what game are you going to try to key in on and really get your eye on?
I mean, hopefully I'm watching North Carolina Gonzaga that day.
That would be great, too. We'll pray for that one, right?
Yeah, I mean, that would be an incredible game. And even if that's not the game, we'll get North Carolina and someone else probably, and then I'm assuming that North Carolina comes out of the bracket with only one ranked team on it. But yeah, I think Florida State Tennessee could be a really fun game. Utah State St. Mary's would be a lot more fun if Cato were playing. That'll still be a pretty fun kind of mid-major matchup. But among the ones you referenced, yeah, I think Florida State Tennessee should be a fun one. I was kind of surprised how I feel like Tennessee was a little underrated coming into the year. Obviously now they're up to 17th, and they beat UW pretty handily a few weeks ago or a couple weeks ago. So Florida State isn't the prettiest team by any means, but like defense, I think defense can be a really fun thing to watch. And Devin Vassal's off to a pretty good start. Raekwon Gray can pass the ball as a big man, which is always kind of fun. And then Trent Forrest isn't necessarily the most aesthetically pleasing player, but he's really going to get into you. And I just always feel like whenever I'm watching Florida State game, he does something that catches my eye. He does something
impactful, right? Yeah.
Yeah, which can be cliche, but yeah, I think that'll be a fun matchup. Some really great guards or some good guards on Tennessee, which would be fun to kind of see how they match up with Tennessee's or Florida State's grind out style. You got Jordan Bowden, Lamont Turner. Pons is also kind of breaking out a little bit this year for Tennessee. Kind of always been a really, really good athlete. Seems like he's putting it together skill-wise a little bit finally. So yeah, those should be two teams that are kind of contrasting the way they get it done, but should be a really fun matchup in the two because they've just got good college players and they're well coached for the most part, and that's the kind of the thing you enjoy as a college basketball watcher, even if the game's not pretty. I mean, if you're looking for pretty basketball, you probably just watch the NBA instead. So I'm excited for that. I'm excited for that matchup on Friday. So we'll see what happens. So hopefully I'm catching the game on rewind because I get to watch Gonzaga and UNC. But regardless, this is going to be kind of a thing where I just try and catch up as many games as possible over the next few weeks. There's a game you miss. You just can't watch every game possible. But it is nice that we're getting kind of in the swing of things, and because good teams are playing each other rather than watching Duke versus Mount St. Mary or something like that, or just two good teams is always fun to watch more than one team blowing out someone who's just a bottom feeder.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. And look, I think we're all kind of secretly rooting for that UNC Gonzaga game. That'd be fantastic. But we don't want to count our chickens before they hatch or anything of that. All right, Jackson, let's get out of here on four fun ones. Let's go number one. Tunes. What have you been listening to lately? Give the what's been you've been pumping out a ton of content. What's in your earbuds and what's on the playlist to help you get through all the college credits and what you're trying to accomplish as a professional in covering college basketball in the NBA?
Oh man, on the playlist currently, I've been listening to some DaBaby recently. Nice. Right now, I think truthfully the song "Pause" on Spotify is something from Jesse McCartney. Truthfully, I have some throwback playlists I listen to every now and then. But
okay, nice.
Mid-2000s and some DaBaby is kind of what I've been listening to recently. But professional-wise, just to get one, just want to find a job eventually. We'll see what happens. But
and listen, if you're listening to those things on your spare time, that sounds like very pleasurable to me. All right, trust. Let's go with one player you trust. Give the listeners one player you really trust that might explode this season. That's been really fun, whether he's an NBA prospect or otherwise. Because I know you look at the game through two different sets of eyes, like as NBA prospects and just as good college basketball players. A college hoop vagabond wants to know who's that one player that you've been really kind of paying attention to, NBA wise or otherwise.
I did a preseason top 30 of guys, and then I just have all these other guys I've been watching that they're just names.
Yeah.
But the guy that I really do like, both a college player and NBA player, is Tyrese Maxey. Talked about him earlier, but just really trust him. Awesome player on both ends. Really good defender. Really good shooter, decision maker as well. Kind of a guy and a ball handler that if he can get that lead roll over Higgins, is really going to propel Kentucky another level. I think Higgins is a solid college player, but I just think Maxey has a lot more upside, and I just trust him, even though he's a freshman. I just think he's kind of the guy who could really make Kentucky a dynamic team in a way they haven't had in a while.
It seems like he might have some of that De'Aaron Fox like gene DNA makeup, where he has just like that special ability in the big game. If we go back and recall Fox's game against UCLA, like he just went off for 30 plus, almost 40 in that tournament game. To me, it seems like Maxey might be that type of like DNA makeup where he's just going to explode in a big game when he needs to. And he has that like skill set and like unique athletic ability that kind of can set him apart. Jackson, how about travels? What's one game you're looking forward to road tripping to this season that you have kind of set up? What's one game that your travels are going to take you to that you're looking forward to?
I don't have anything officially on the docket, but I'm angling toward either making the trip to Tucson for Gonzaga, Arizona, or just across the state for Gonzaga, UW. So I'll be I don't know if I'll be at both of those. I'll definitely be at least one of them, but I really do think Gonzaga, Arizona could be a heck of a game. So hopefully I can make that trip, get some sunshine in the middle of the winter or the cold season here up in Spokane. But yeah, I mean, ideally.
Yeah, either one of those sounds amazing. I mean, if you're going to go to UW and the Zags, that sounds like an awesome matchup. Period. But if you're going to go to Arizona and take in some Nico Mannion and like that sounds okay too. All right, and then taste, Jackson. You're out on the West Coast and you do cover the 76ers. So do you have a preference, East Coast versus West Coast, like IPA beverage? What do you think?
I prefer so I haven't been to the East Coast very often. I do want to live over there at some point, but I would say for what I do, I prefer the West Coast because it's nice that pretty much every game is over by 10:30 regardless of sport. Whereas if I live in New York, that game that starts 7 p.m. West Coast means it ends at 12:30 a.m. East Coast. So from someone who watches and kind of centers their life around a lot of sports, I prefer the West Coast. Can't think of any craft beers really that come to mind, but yeah, I would say I'm a West Coast guy.
I was going to say there's been many a late night over here on the East Coast staying up late to watch your teams out there, so I totally get the vibe that you're getting at there. All right, listeners, we just want to say if you're not paying attention to Jackson on Twitter, please give Jackson a follow. He is at Jack Frank, all lowercase, _JJF. So follow him on Twitter at Jack Frank, all lowercase, _JJF. You can follow all of his basketball meanderings and thoughts there. Jackson, we just want to say thank you for giving the podcast some time and expanding our knowledge here on Gonzaga and the rest of the college basketball landscape. Thanks so much, man.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. I've been watching a lot of it over the last 3 weeks. And it's nice to voice some of those thoughts. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, of course. Anytime, Jackson. Totally good to catch up. Cheers. Salachi, Salachi, everybody.
I'm addicted to the appetite.